And one of the things that I wanted to say is that here we are, it's Palm Sunday, and a little kid I knew, his name was Billy, 6 years old, he couldn't go to church that day, Palm Sunday, and he's not feeling well. The family comes home, they've got all these green palms, and they're kind of all upbeat. He goes, what happened? What happened? He says, oh yeah, we were celebrating Jesus' arrival today. And he goes, oh, man, and this is the week that I choose not to come. He finally arrives. So we can imagine the feeling that somebody might have when spring is here and they've been invited and then it shows up in a different way than they expected. And so today we're going to talk about our expectations, maybe our past, what has led us to where we are now, and then the big question, now what? What's next? Where do we go from here? Because we're always awakening. We're awakening to the new, to the now, but every once in a while we get pulled back into the past or we start imagining about some future that may not even happen. But we have this great way of awfulizing. Anyone else do that? You know, we look at something and we imagine a very worst thing that could happen. Well, then that's going to lead to this, and then this is going to be that, and then next thing I know, I'm going to be out on the street. So we awfulize. But we don't have to, because we can every day remind ourselves that as humans having this human experience, we can also tap into that place that Sharon was talking about with Papa G, right? We are an ocean in and of ourselves. We just have to tap into it, because a lot of time we can get caught up in little minutia. So I thought it would be good to step into this year's theme is called A Grand Rising. Sounds good, right? A grand rising. And what a great time in the spring to think about that grand rising. I plant bulbs every fall, and it's added to the bulbs that are already there. So I've got irises coming up, and I've got all these daffodils coming up. I had a few little crocuses, but they're so come and gone that, I'm wondering, is it worth it next year to do it again? But I probably will, because they have a little sprig of bluish purple, and then whoosh, gone. Like a rainbow, right? The purple part of the rainbow. So as we look at our past, it's easy to recognize sometimes how it has shaped us. But one of the things we do when we're training in the classes here, or we're doing practitioner training, we're trying to learn about, is we keep on questioning our past. Because you'd think that you'd just be able to say, okay, I'm done. I've looked at it. I'm done. But it keeps coming back, remarkably enough, in all different ways. And some say, oh, it keeps coming up until you get the lesson, right? But some lessons are forever, because our spiritual growth and our spiritual life is forever. So why do we rush it and think that it's going to be over anytime soon? Because I've made up the world that has brought me, and probably you, to this very point. So I did sort of a retrospective in preparation for the talk. I said, let's see, what's important? What brought me here? And why am I still doing this? And what's next? So I looked back and I said, there have been a few pivotal points in my life, and I invite you to do this over the next week. Think of a few, maybe 5 or so, pivotal points where you made a choice and it helped inform who you are today, where you are today. So one of the things that I noticed is that I had to start like a James Michener novel. How many of you have written? Oh, not that many have read James Michener. Oh, read, not written. I didn't mean you're writing an 800-page novel. But, he always starts 50 million years ago. I'm only going to start 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years ago, you can imagine these people that have been thinking for 3,000 years that their king is coming. Their king is coming and is going to save them because they've been under the rule of the Egyptians. They've been under the rule now of the Romans. And they're always, it seems, under the thumb of something. And now finally, praise, Hosanna, we have the King. The King is here. And so we know the story, but back then, they were living the story. So they are praising on Sunday that we call Palm Sunday. And then you can imagine their disappointment just a few days later when the physical king that was supposed to change the world didn't seem to change the world. And so it would take years, in fact, lifetimes, to change that faith of Christianity into the world's leading religion that it is today. They had faith. Some of them were able to continue going because they said, what's next? What's next? Maybe it's not the physical kingdom that we're thinking about. Maybe it's this spiritual kingdom that is available to each of us every day. Maybe. So what's next took us forward in time. So what has this got to do with my pivotal moments? Well, I look back and I said, when I was a kid, I was actually baptized Catholic. So my grandmother on my dad's side and my two uncles and my father, although my father claimed himself to be a fallen Catholic. So he didn't go to services, but he was willing to get us baptized so that Grandma would like it. And it turned out my Uncle John built the church, the Catholic church there in Casper, Wyoming, so that's where I was baptized. So I didn't remember a thing about it. Little tiny person. But over that next 7 years, my life goes in chapters of 7, by the way. Over the next 7 years, I was largely under the authoritarian rule of my parents and teachers. And that informed me in ways that I'm still remembering. The be a good boy. And that's a tough thing to do. In Wyoming, you got all this expanse. If you just jump over the fence, there's nothing between me and the mountain. And be back by dinner. Would we let our kids go out there? I wouldn't let my little grandkids go running off into who knows where at that age, but we did. About 7 years later, because my mother was the churchgoer, and so she was a member of the First Christian Church. And I thought, that's great. Here we are, Casper, Wyoming, and we have the First Christian Church. I'm amazed that they put it here. Well, later I learned that actually it's part of a larger movement called the Disciples of Christ. And they have lots of First Christian churches all around the country. Imagine my disappointment. But I liked the coloring books, right? Because that's the age. And then later I was in the choir. I was a tenor when my voice came in. But as a rebellious teenager, just, the second 7, I asked, wait, why doesn't Dad have to go to church? He gets to stay home, he gets to paint the house, he gets to work in the backyard, he gets to do all these things. Well, they didn't have a good answer for it. So that was kind of the end of going to church, except on special occasions, So fast forward another 7 years, and my father says, I'm going to help you with your spiritual growth. And he bought me Transcendental Meditation. It cost money to sign up for these courses. And I was in Laramie, Wyoming at the university there, and they had a small chapter. And I had the great fortune to go down to Boulder, Colorado and see Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the founder of Transcendental Meditation. Each one of us was given our own mantra, secret. Can't tell anyone else because that will take away its power. And I remember my mantra today, and I use it from time to time because we now know that TM, like any meditation, helps with reducing anxiety, reducing stress, creating greater mindfulness, And if you keep doing it over and over again, you could become Maharishi Mahesh Yoga yourself, because you could steep yourself in just this kind of a life. This is what the Dalai Lama said too. He said, if you just practice for 70 years like I have, you too can be a spiritual leader in your own life. So remember, it just depends on the path you choose. Now, what was next for me as a rebellious teenager in Casper, Wyoming? Mostly and chiefly mischief. We'll talk about that in another time. So, Mary Oliver, one of my favorite poets, and I brought my books to back me up in case I need them. But Mary Oliver, how many of you know the poet Mary Oliver? And of course, one of her famous and beloved poems is called The Journey. And I think it's appropriate because it reminds us of our own journey and each day and way in which we get to become present to what we need. So I changed it into first person, much like we do with prayer. So I'll be speaking it in first person. She writes it in second person. So one day I finally knew what I had to do and began. Though the voices around me kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble. And I felt the old tug at my ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried. But I didn't stop. I knew what I had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones, but little by little, as I left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which I slowly recognized as my own, that kept me company as I strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing I could do, determined to save the only life I could save. So she asks us to not be content with where we are. She says, take a look at what you need. The voices around you don't know what you need. And if you let them tell you, like that authoritarian rule as a 7-year-old, when you don't know any better, in fact, you can't take care of yourself. But now we can. And we can continuously ask, what's mine to do? And she said, we can be a leader. We can be a leader in our own lives. Reverend Tracy's talking about the 15 conscious leadership habits, and we've talked about a few of them, but candor, integrity, intuition, curiosity, these are the things that lead us to stride deeper and deeper into our own world to save our lives. Because only if we are shining brightly can we at all be any good to everyone else around us. We have to start at our own front porch. And as the journey unfolds, each one of us gets to choose our direction, our path, the things that's important to us. Now, Maharishi Mahesh Yoga, he influenced millions, right? Well, fast forward to my 7th 7, and I was going through changes just like the world was. It was the new millennium. Things were happening all around. There was words and concerns. And they say that when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. Well, I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area, and there were thousands of teachers. So I got to sit with Don Miguel Ruiz and listen to the 4 agreements through his stories. I got to sit on the hot seat with Byron Katie. She asked the work. What is her question? Is it true? Can you really know with a capital K-N-O-W that it is true? And that question then turns around. You might get an aha in that moment, but it's possibly days, weeks, and months later when the question turns around and around and around in your head, and finally answers instead of questions start to arise. And then you can know better what to do, where to go next. So if we are ready, our teachers will arrive. They will come and show us the way. Now, during leadership training it was a 2-year training after I became a coach at the Coaches Training Institute in San Rafael, once again, in beautiful Marin County. So we had this retreat. We did all the usual leadership things. But we're asked to say, what is your purpose and who are you? So I said, after much work, 2 years, I am the cosmological wizard, bringing a total waking up to me and the world. Well, that's pretty expansive. But you can put a whole bunch of things under that sort of rubric. An entire life can be put under that total waking up. And who did I start with? I had to wake myself up. Not just then, but every day. That's the practice. Every day, waking up. And so one of the people that I worked with is a fellow named David White. Some of you may know him, W-H-Y-T-E, a poet and a coach to companies. And he uses his poetry to help jar people out of their daily world with poetry, because poetry touches us at a place where Charlie Brown words don't oftentimes sink in, because we've learned, they're just talking. Put it right over the head, but a poem can touch you. So this is his poem that's called What to Remember When Waking. In the first hardly noticed moments in which you wake, coming back to this life from the other, more secret, movable, and frighteningly honest world where everything began, there is a small opening in the new day which closes the moment you begin planning. When you can plan, it is too small for you to live. What you can live wholeheartedly will make plans enough for the vitality hidden in your sleep. To be human is to become visible while carrying what is hidden as a gift to others. To remember the other world in this world is to live in your true inheritance. You are not a troubled guest on this earth. You are not an accident amidst other accidents. You were invited from another and greater night than the one from which you have just emerged. Now, looking through the slanting light of the morning window toward the mountain presence of everything that can be, what urgency calls you to your one love? What urgency calls you to your one love? What shape wants and waits in the seed of you to grow and spread its branches against a future sky? Is it waiting in the fertile sea, in the trees behind the house, in the life you can imagine for yourself, in the open and lovely white page on the writing desk? David White invites us to look for that which is calling us. It could be anything, because each of us gets to think about what's important to us. Our practitioners are taking a look at a book suggested by Reverend Tracy called The Most Important Thing, Discovering Truth at the Heart of Life. It's by Adyashanti. He says, if we can find what's most important, everything else kind of vanishes. What's the most important? And even the very question got me a little nervous, because the first thing I did was I say, well, I can think of 5. And I said, I'll put what's most important in each of the 5 petals. But to narrow it down to one. But then he pointed out that it can be a grand one. Something like the North Star, something like a total waking up. That can be it, and underneath, all sorts of things can arise that align and are integral to that wording. What's the most important thing? He says, our inner lives are every bit as astonishing, baffling, and mysterious as the infinite vastness of the cosmos. As astonishing, our inner life. So we can be baffled, of course, because we see these James Webb telescope pictures and we think, oh my gosh, how is it possible that our inner world could be like that? But the truth is, our inner world is a mirror of the outer world and vice versa. So that strangeness, that baffling wonderment is ours to lead. We get to be leaders. We get to be conscious leaders. And as a conscious leader, we don't have to just be in front of the room. We can lead from the side. We can lead from the back of the room. We can lead from every part of our life by just being who we are. Being integral to our own truth. Now, does forever seem a long time? It does. However, we know in this practice that there's only one thing going on and one time going on because it's all connected. So that forever is really part of who we are. As spiritual beings, we have a long time. I ask my students, what would it be like if the truth comes around that we can live forever? Ray Kurzweil, a futurist, says in his book, The Singularity is Near, that the combination of nanotechnology, genetic technology, the technology of chips and things is going to make it possible for humans 2.0. We could live forever. All these bones, they always decay, the skin goes away, but heck, how many people know somebody with a implanted knee? Anyone? How about a hip, a shoulder, an elbow? A friend of mine, she's got knees, hips, elbows, shoulders. So she calls herself the bionic woman. She says her joints are going to outlive her. She can still ski, she can still hike. She loves it because she was in pain because her bones, for some reason, degenerated at the critical joints. So what would we do if we could be forever? Learn a new instrument? Learn all the languages there are to learn. How many of you have seen Groundhog's Day? Right? He learned everything. After a while, he knew exactly when, he's going to fall out of the tree right now, catch him. So that forever can be a game and a life changer. But we don't have to live forever to live every moment as valuable and foreverness. Because then, if each moment you're fully alive, fully awake, holy smokes, you're living forever. Because there is only this moment. So one of the things that we say is that the way that we see this one power, this one presence, is as love and law. And so we can give ourselves to love because love ultimately is what we're after. And so as we look at that, let's take this thought of the now moment and what's next into prayer. I know there's only one power, one presence, one perfect, all-powerful being of love and light and power that is in us, it is through us, it is as us right here in this room. It knows that our purpose is right with us every day. And since that truth is true for me, it must be true for you and everyone listening to this. And even people that don't know it are being impacted by this power, by this presence. And what we do, the way we lead, the way we become conscious is our birthright. And so we get to choose what's next. What's next for me? And as we live the truth of what's next for me, then that kingdom of heaven is truly ours right here and right now. So I know this is true, and I'm grateful for this teaching. And I just send these words of power into the action of love and law, knowing it is already done. And join with me in saying, and so it is.